You wake in a dank solar, back pressed against half-rotted straw that offers exactly zero comfort. A fetid stew of sweat, burned torches, and open sewers slaps you awake faster than any rooster's crow. Your tunic clings damply to skin that still tastes faintly of mold and chamber pot vinegar. Bone-marrow porridge slides down your throat like gritty mortar, each spoonful a reminder that royalty often tastes like regret. Courtiers shimmer in perfumed silks just beyond your cell, their laughter a soundtrack to your misery. Yet here you are, a medieval prince, trading every modern luxury for a day in this fragrant nightmare. So turn down the lights, maybe tuck into your favorite blanket, and before this dank nightmare lulls you into complacency, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll thank yourself later. Now, brace yourself. The iron crown sits heavier on your head than any armor, but at least the show's just begun. You push aside coarse wool blankets that cling damply to your shoulders as dawn's pale light seeps through a crack in the shutter. A fetid tang of half-rotted straw greets your nostrils, mingling with the sour stench of yesterday's chamber pot still puddled in the corner. Each breath draws in the earthy funk of open sewers snaking beneath the solar's flagstones, an odor that clings like an unwelcome memory. You force yourself upright on a mattress of straw and feathers whose foul juices have turned your tunic limp and sticky. A servant shoves a wooden trencher under your chin, jammed full of bone-marrow porridge whose metallic tang cuts through the morning haze. Your tongue recoils as you swallow, the chalky gristle reminding you that princely privilege tastes like chalk and regret. The faint sweetness of burnt barley mingles with the porridge's iron-rich whispers, a flavor no court banquet could ever replicate. Even the bread, a hunk of coarse barley loaf, carries a dull bitterness that testifies to a baker's scarcity of salt. Already your gut churns with anticipation of the next mouthful, even as your teeth grind at the gritty fragments trapped between them. A handful of half-blackened raisins offers a fleeting illusion of relief before dissolving into vinegary ash. A whiff of roasted onion drifts from a bowl across the room, only to be replaced by the acrid smoke of torches freshly stoked. You nearly gag as a draught carries the scent of slow-rotten cabbage from the kitchens below, where spilled scraps fester in open barrels. Each spoonful feels like a gamble. Will you choke? Or will you survive long enough to curse another morning in silk-stained discomfort? You've endured the worst of taste and smell, from the slime of sewers to the gristle in your porridge, and now the day's duties beckon. Soon you'll trade this trencher for a rod and scroll, but first you learn that each breath and bite in princely life is its own unwritten tribute. Rising from the low bench, you blot your tunic on hurriedly rinsed water, the cold hand of the basin sending tremors up your arm. A twig-thin page removes your sooty shoes, leaving your feet to squirm against the damp earth floor. The scent of tanned leather clings to the court slippers you are required to wear, stiff with dried sweat and the faint trace of previous owners. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished shield hung as ornament and note the pallid cast of your cheeks. Your breath clouds in the chill air, carrying hints of dried herbs from yesterday's poorly brewed posset. Even the water you ladle into your mouth tastes faintly of rust where the basin's rim has corroded. Courtiers in woolen jackets shuffle past with their own mouths full of whispered gossip and scraps of stale gruel. You swallow, already tasting the sharp sting of whispered betrayal that wafts through tiled corridors. A servant presses a damp cloth to your forehead, the cold linen dragging away sweat and scattering flecks of straw into your hair. Your nostrils flare at the faintest trace of lavender, an attempt at luxury that barely masks the underlying stench. You wince as damp fabric clings to your arms, each fold pressing shards of straw against your skin. The fabric's weight is negligible compared to the burden of expectation it carries. You taste the salt of your own nerves after realizing this tunic will be the uniform for your first council meeting. Your mouth dries as the sweetness of last night's wine silted across your tongue like a dying ember. You sense the faintest trace of burnt rosemary from the wax seal on the morning's summons scroll. Still, you cannot escape the cloying aroma of cold ashes from the hearth embers scattered at your feet. Each inhalation brings a reminder that princely privilege often glimmers brightest in the shape of ashes and dust. You swallow again, focusing on the tune of distant footsteps pacing the antechamber. Your lips part to speak, but the taste of stale mead lends your words a slurred softness. For a moment, the world outside seems to pause. The clanging of armor, the hum of early strategy, all still in suspended animation. Then your name echoes through the hall, followed by a chorus of curt bows and the scrape of wood across stone. You step forward, tasting ambition's metallic edge before it dissolves into the court's perfumed haze. Already the next bite of reality looms, and you wonder if this is what royalty was meant to taste like. A stray rat scuttles behind a pillar, drawn by the scraps of porridge you abandoned. Its squeak is a reminder that even vermin share in your princely handouts. You drop your eyes, blinking at the glitter of coins spilled near your moccasins, as if fortune itself refuses to shine. And yet, despite every rancid flavor and damp misstep, you find humor in the absurdity, because if you can't laugh at a rat eating your breakfast, what are you even doing? You step into the great hall, your footsteps echoing like distant drums. Flickering torches reveal rows of barons whose stiff silhouettes promise defiance rather than fealty. They clutch scrolls of grievances and pleas, as if each parchment could tilt the balance of your reign. The murmur of hushed consultations drapes over you like a cold cloak of expectation. Soon, you'll need to steer this sea of agendas without capsizing. At the head of the long oak table, your gaze meets the steward's expectant nod, an invitation to sift through ledgers thicker than a knight's shield. One baron thumps his fist on the table, demanding coin for fortifications you've barely funded. Another softly unmasks a tangled web of alliances, warning you that a misplaced word could ignite civil strife. The steward's quill scratches across parchment, as if etching your doom in real time. You catch a glimpse of a counsellor leaning close, his breath infused with stale mead and a hint of malice. He suggests reallocating harvest tithes to pay a debt, his smile a blade sheathed in courtesy. You inhale the sharp scent of vellum and ink, preparing to counter every accusation before it solidifies into action. One petition pings across the table slower than a faltering messenger network, each arrival a tiny test of your patience. A solitary war horn's echo drifts through the open archway, reminding you of distant borders fraying under rival claims. The hall's stone columns seem to lean inward, pressing on your shoulders with silent demands. You weigh each petition like precious ore, mindful that you're as vulnerable as an exposed flank. A messenger slinks forward, bearing a sealed scroll stamped with a rival duke's crest. The seal cracks with a solemn pop, releasing a chill promise of renewed negotiations, or renewed treason. When the steward hands you pen and ink, your heartbeat rattles like iron on stone. Each signature seals alliances and animosities in equal measure. A soft cough draws your attention to a distant corner where two knights exchange furtive glances. Their whispered exchange dissolves into the hall's hum, yet you catch the phrase "lost territory" before it vanishes. The flicker of torchlight dances on embroidered crests, each symbol reminding you of the power each lord commands. You sense the responsibility perched on your spine, heavier than any tabard of silk you'll ever don. A sudden draft billows through, stirring parchments and stirring your resolve. In that gust, you glimpse hooded faces at the entrance. Messengers from the church bearing edicts and ultimatums. Their edicts upload themselves into your docket with the solemnity of a mandatory software update. You press your palm to the smooth oak, grounding yourself in the gravity of decisions etched into this table. As the council murmurs and mischief intertwines, you realize that leadership demands a sharper mind than any sword. A baron's nod spurs you onward, and you announce a judgment that will ripple across the countryside. The hall falls silent, every pair of eyes tracing your words as they land like arrows. Even the court's fleas stir at the tension, skittering across tapestries in a final reminder of unseen threats. You conclude this session with a measured decree, sending bailiffs scuttling like nervous mice to deliver your will. The echo of your command reverberates through arched corridors, an imprint of authority. You step back from the dais, feeling the collective breath of barons released like wind from a depleted bellows. A guard straightens your mantle as though you're the prize falcon perched in regal silence. You nod curtly and exit the hall, leaving behind a tableau of calculations and concealed daggers. Each step away tastes of relief, tempered by the knowledge that every ally here is also a potential foe. As the great doors thud shut, the hall's cool twilight follows you into dimly lit corridors. Your heartbeat slows, but your mind claws through each moment of debate, cataloguing promises and threats. Already the next council beckons, and you wonder if the power of a prince is ever more than a moment's illusion. Yet at least you survived court politics without so much as a splintered nerve. So go ahead and pat yourself on the back, you diplomat in training. Your fingers press into the rough-hewn bench, the splintered oak biting through the thin linen of your sleeve. A chill runs up your arm as you shrug into a woolen surcoat so stiff it protests with every movement. The coarseness of the fabric scratches your neck like an ill-fit collar, reminding you that even princely garments can feel like punishment. Take a moment to center yourself. You've endured the sense and politics of court, and now it's time to feel the weight of every stitch and rivet on your skin. A squire approaches, sliding a chainmail hauberk over your head. The interlocking rings settle on your shoulders with a metallic whisper. Each link presses into your collarbone, a cold reminder that protection often comes at the price of constant discomfort. You shift, feeling the hauberk's weight pull your torso downward, as if gravity itself conspires against you. Beneath the mail, a padded gambeson bulges and bunches, its uneven layers pressing like 1,000 tiny pillows gone rogue. Your breath catches as the leather straps bite across your chest, tightening with precise cruelty. Even the simple act of raising an arm becomes a laborious effort, like lifting a fully loaded cart up a hill. You glance down at the gorget encircling your throat, its polished steel surface, cold enough to steal away warmth. Each rivet imprint is a tactile scorecard of the countless knights who've worn this armor before you. The fabric of your hose feels suddenly inadequate, its thin weave offering little defense against shifting metal and biting wind. You pull at the embroidered breeches, the ornate stitching snagging on your gauntlets' edges. The gauntlets themselves feel like iron gauntlets in truth. Clumsy, unyielding, and eager to pinch at your fingertips. Your boots arrive next. Heavy leather greaves secured by brass buckles that require both hands, and a few choice words to fasten. The soles are thick and cracked, their once supple leather now hardened by rain and travel. Each step sends a shudder through your spine as the boots transmit every cobblestone's crack and crevice. You shift your weight, feeling the shift of chainmail rings under your tunica constant, grinding reminder of layered defenses. A cloak of finest wool is draped over your shoulders, its weight rivaling the armor beneath. The fabric's plush softness offers a fleeting comfort before you remember how drenched it already is from the morning's damp. You press the cloak's folds to your chest, trapping warmth against steel. But the relief is as brief as a blink. A squire nods, stepping back to admire your finery. You taste the irony of being both grandiose and utterly trapped. You run a hand along the rich embroidery, an intricate pattern that feels impossibly smooth against the coarse warp of your surcoat. The contrast between thread and wool is a tactile lesson in the gulf between appearance and reality. Your helmet is handed over next, its rounded crown humming as you lift it, the interior lined with rough padding that rubs at your scalp. Sliding the helmet into place, you hear the faint creak of leather straps and the settling of steel that seals your vision to a narrow slit. Light filters through like a poor-quality video stream, your world reduced to pinpricks of brightness. One more loading screen in a day of delays. You swallow, tasting the faint hint of oil from the helmet's joints as you secure each buckle. Your gloves snap shut around the weapon's hilt, the leather resisting before finally giving way with a muffled pop. You flex your fingers, feeling the glove's inner seams press into your palms as if testing your resolve. Every ridge and seam now seems magnified, each stitch a reminder that royalty feels every imperfection. A final adjustment sends a shiver through you as metal meets flesh. The gauntlets are lining at your wrists with excruciating precision. You lift your arms to test the fit, the armor's sections shifting like tectonic plates under strain. The weight settles, and you taste victory's metallic edge before reality reminds you it's only preparation for the next ordeal. You lower your arms, wincing as the mail bites into your shoulders one last time. The squire steps forward again, offering a scabbard that rests snugly against your hip, its leather scuffed and worn. You slide your sword into place, the weapon's weight minimal compared to the burden of public expectation. With armor donned and reins of power firmly in hand, you feel both invincible and irreversibly caged. You flex your knees, testing the gambeson's bulk, and realize that freedom is measured in the absence of every tight strap. Still, despite the clamor of metal and fabric, you steel yourself for the day's next chapter, because if you can't survive one more layer, what hope is there for ruling a kingdom? Imagine yourself stepping into the cool dawn air of Windsor Castle's courtyard, where the lingering aroma of last night's spiced mead drapes over the flagstones. You inhale the faint sweetness of honey and clove, a scent meant to mask the sour sweat of exhausted soldiers returning from border skirmishes. The warmth of that fragrance brushes your senses like a gentle reminder that even royalty thrives on borrowed comforts. Take a moment to let that contrast sink in between the sweetness you taste in the air and the uncertainty that follows you like a shadow. A baker's cart sits nearby, offering loaf after loaf of coarse rye bread, each crust crackling with promise and dusted with flour. You pluck a dense slice, feeling its firm edges yield to your grip, and the yeasty perfume rises into appreciative nostrils. That simple comfort harks back to childhood afternoons when stale crumbs were shared beneath a hawthorn tree. Let that memory settle before you recall the weight of your bloodline bearing down upon you. The courtyard's edge holds a barrel of salted herring brine, its pungent sting weaving through the sweetness of mead and bread. You venture closer, noting how the sour tang clings to your tongue days after a single taste. It serves as a brusque reminder that sustenance here is rarely gentle. Pause to acknowledge how each flavor, honeyed, yeasty, briny, mirrors the twists of your inheritance. A chamberlain emerges, carrying a modest portion of buttered porridge, still warm with the faint nuttiness of oats and the barest hint of salt. The steam lifts in lazy spirals, carrying that soft aroma toward your expectant lips. You sip slowly, letting the porridge's unpretentious warmth calm the gnaw of anticipatory dread. Let that quiet comfort ground you before we move deeper into the court's undercurrents. Imagine yourself trailing behind your older brother Richard as he storms past, his cloak sweeping up a gust of stale air from the stables. The mingled scents of horse sweat and damp straw press into your senses, a stark counterpoint to the porridge's mild ease. You follow him, tasting the metallic tang of his disdain for your younger brother status. Hold on to that contrast between nurturing warmth and brotherly cold as we proceed. The open door of the great hall spills more aromas. Roasted capon speckled with herbs, its savoury perfume swirling above the long tables. You stand at the threshold, imagining how each bite could be a token of favour or a tool of manipulation. The scent of roasting meat feels almost ceremonial, as if each slice carries the weight of political promises. Let that vision linger before we explore the stakes tied to each morsel. A guard beckons you inside, and the heat from blazing torches brings forth the faint odour of scorched oak and burning resin. Behind you, the smell of damp castle walls fades, replaced by a richer palette of smoke and spice. You step forward, tasting the heady mixture like a prelude to negotiations yet to come. Pause to appreciate how environment and aroma merge to shape your mood before council convenes. The head chamberlain offers a goblet of mulled wine scented with nutmeg and crushed rose petals, its heady bouquet curling around your mind. You raise the goblet, feeling its chill contrast the torchlit warmth, and draw the fragrant vapors deep into your lungs. The taste unfolds slowly, revealing layers of sweetness undercut by a faint whisper of bitterness, echoes of alliances forged and broken. Let that complexity remind you that even simple pleasures here are entangled with power dynamics. A tray of spiced fruit arrives next. Dried apricots softened in garlic, infused wine, their sticky sweetness tempered by a whisper of savoury heat. You pluck one, savouring how the flavours swirl and collide on your tongue in gentle upheaval. That momentary delight belies the tension simmering in the hall's shadowed corners. Let that tension settle as we prepare for the negotiations' gustatory stage. Council begins, and the scent of ink and parchment drifts through the air, mingling with the faint musk of battered leather scroll cases. You can almost taste the gravity of each document as you breathe in a dry, acrid note that speaks of treaties and tributaries. Imagine yourself breathing slowly, letting that sober aroma steal your resolve for the bargains ahead. Hold on to that calm before we move toward the heart of John's political struggles. As you turn to face the gathered lords, the lingering echo of spiced wine and roast meat follows you, a tapestry of taste that trails each word you speak. You sense how every flavor you've consumed this morning weaves into the narrative you present to them. The council's outcome rests on the subtleties of your delivery, as much as on the spices in your goblet. Imagine yourself standing tall, buoyed by the warmth still glowing in your veins, ready to stake your claim in a game older than any feast. And as the lords lean forward, you taste in the hush a promise and a threat, two flavors inseparable in Prince John's fate. You step into the vaulted great hall and taste the tension thicker than the hearth smoke curling overhead. Lords and ladies drape themselves across benches like statues awaiting judgment. You sense their whispered calculations braided through the hush, each glance a pawn move in a larger struggle. Allow that hush to settle, a moment's calm before the storm of voices. By now you've witnessed the silent power plays echo through every bowed head. Ahead lies the struggle for influence, with each word carving alliances or cleaving bonds. A crimson-draped baron leans forward, his jeweled finger-tapping parchment as deliberately as a metronome. You lean in and taste the challenge in the rustle of vellum. His voice unfurls, a low rumble of fealty laced with threats sweeter than any spiced wine. Pause and feel how each syllable sends ripples through the assembled court. You've now grasped that words here carry the weight of sword and shield. Next, you'll navigate the hidden alliances veiled in courteous smiles. Across the hall, a bishop clasps his rosary beads like encryption keys guarding a secret network. You note the subtle shift as he offers prayers that double as political leverage. The hush around his voice feels sacred and strategic at once. Let that duality ground you before the next thrust of intrigue. An envoy from Aquitaine produces a sealed letter, the seal's edge bearing the crest of your sister's husband. You watch the chamberlain break it with ceremonious inevitability, its parchment crackling like an overdue decree. The contents spill obligations wrapped in familial duty and diplomatic strain. Breathe in the gravity of those demands before they bind you. Already, you've navigated threats from kin and clergy alike. Now turns the tide toward murmurs of rebellion reaching your ears through hidden channels. A messenger bursts through side doors, breath ragged, cloak flapping like a tattered banner. He whispers of barons gathering in the north, tongues primed for revolt. You feel the hush in the hall tighten, as if embers smother under a closing lid. Pause to let that ember-like tension simmer before you fan the flames of response. Allies shift in silence, support fracturing like mortar between weathered stones. Each nod and hesitation etches itself into your mind's ledger of loyalty. You must choose which bonds to uphold and which to abandon. Feel the weight of that choice settle in your chest before counsel resumes. A counselor confronts you with demands for ransom, numbers scrawled in his ledger like verdicts awaiting your signature. You swallow the shock, tasting its acrid bitterness on your tongue. Reality bites harder than any warhorse's iron-shod hoof. Take a moment to steady your breath before the final show of politicking. In the shadowed corner, your brother Richard smirks, his eyes reflecting every misstep you've made. That grin cuts deeper than any blade, a reminder that blood ties are edged with ambition. You steady your voice and offer your own terms, measured, precise, unwavering. Feel the hall's pulse quicken in reaction to each carefully chosen phrase. You've weathered baronial bluster, clerical cunning, and familial sabotage in equal measure. Now, prepare to face the Church's final decree on your ambitions. The Archbishop rises, crozier tapping like a solemn metronome marking each heartbeat of obedience. His words flow like liturgy and demand allegiance more binding than iron shackles. You sense that your fate now hinges on this final sermon of authority. The hush returns, heavy as a tolling bell awaiting your response. As you stand beneath the carved angels, you feel the centuries' weight bearing down. And with that, every promise here feels provisional. It's about as stable as untested software on launch day. Imagine yourself sliding into a heavy velvet robe, its fabric cool and dense against your skin. Each fold settles around you like the hush before a whispered confession. The hem brushes the stone floor with a gentle drag, its weight a constant reminder of your station. Let that sensation ground you in the moment, as the robe's heaviness echoes the gravity of your position. You shift in a chair carved from oak, its armrests worn smooth by decades of princely elbows. The wood's grain imprints against your sleeve, lending a subtle roughness beneath the fine linen. You press your palm into a carved lion's face at the chair's corner, feeling each crease beneath your fingers. Hold that tactile memory as a prelude to the textures yet to come. A squire offers you a coif of chainmail, its interlocking rings cold and unyielding in your grasp. You run a finger across its surface, tracing the metallic pattern like braille of war. Each ring shifts with a soft click, a mechanical chorus that fills your mind with anticipation. Breathe in the weight settling on your shoulders before the next adjustment. Underneath, a padded gambeson cushions the mail, its quilted layers pressing into your ribs. The fabric's fibers whisper against one another, a muffled symphony of protection. You flex, and the padding cradles each breath like a careful caretaker. Let that comfort linger before the steel reaches for your skin. The knight's belt slides around your waist, leather smooth yet unbroken by time. You tug it closed, and the buckle's brass sheen catches the torchlight. The strap knots snugly, a gentle constraint that shapes your posture. Pause to feel the belt's steadfast hold as it anchors your form. A gauntlet slides onto your hand, the finger plates clicking as they align. You flex your fingers, marveling at the fusion of rigidity and flexibility. The cool steel warms slowly against your blood, a quiet dialogue between metal and flesh. Hold that warmth before it recedes under the next layer of gear. The visor of your helmet lowers with a precise hiss, its lattice pressing against your cheeks. You feel the gentle abrasion of iron on skin, each bar a barrier to the world outside. Darkness envelops your sight, yet you sense the hall's expanse through faint echoes. Let that half-light settle, between isolation and authority. You rest your cheek against the pommel of your sword as it hangs at your side, its leather grip worn to a polished patina. The pommel's weight is a constant anchor, both reassuring and unrelenting. You trace a fingertip along the hilt's twisted design, feeling the craftsman's intent. Breathe in that moment of connection before the blade enters the fray of politics. The wooden floor beneath your feet shifts under your weight, each plank creaking like a reluctant witness. You lift a foot and feel the slight give of aged timber, a reminder that even sturdy foundations age. That subtle vibration resonates up your leg, tethering you to the castle's living history. Pause to acknowledge how every step here carries echoes of predecessors. Your cloak's clasp presses into your collarbone, its ornate design biting ever so slightly into flesh. You adjust it to ease the pressure, and the relief is immediate, tiny but profound. The clasp's cool enamel warms in seconds, a fleeting contrast you commit to memory. Hold on to that fleeting relief as you breathe into the closing moment. The layers you wear, velvet, linen, leather, steel, merge into a single presence you both inhabit and command. Each texture imprints upon the next, weaving a tapestry of sensation that defines your morning. Imagine that weaving settling into your bones, a reminder of duty and distinction. And as you rise from your seat, the collected layers sigh in concert, armor and attire united for the day's drama. It's a snug fit, but then again, so is the path of ambition. Who knew destiny could feel as snug as a second skin? Imagine yourself crouched beside a weathered stone slab, its surface mottled with centuries of damp. A faint earthiness rises in your nostrils, a mix of loam, moss, and something older, almost metallic. You lean in, tasting that cool dampness on your tongue like the aftertaste of a long-forgotten rain. Pause to notice how each inhalation draws you deeper into the crypt's whispered secrets before we trace its hidden passages. A low wheeze of shifting rubble follows your fingertips as you brush aside a layer of brittle limestone. The dust tickles your throat, leaving a dry, chalky residue that clings with surprising insistence. Each grain seems to whisper stories of collapse and concealment. Let that gritty memory settle before we glimpse what lies beneath the dust. You press your palm against a carved relief, feeling the indentations worn smooth by centuries of pilgrim hands. The cool stone sends a sudden shiver along your palm, a tactile echo of lives long past. Its edges feel faintly damp, as if the walls themselves exhale into your skin. Pause to anchor yourself in that cool contact before we venture further into the dark. A narrow passage yawns ahead, its entrance rimmed with lichen and old sap. You crawl forward, the smell of resin clinging to your hair, lingering from ancient torches long extinguished. That sticky scent intermingles with the sharper bite of limestone dust. Let that resinous aftertaste linger as you brace for the chamber's depths. At the chamber's heart lies a stone coffin, its lid etched with intertwined animals and cryptic runes. The carvings feel almost soft under your fingertips, worn by time until they yield like velvet in your grasp. You gently trace a looping rune, tasting in your mind the hush of clandestine rituals. Pause to let the sensation of worn stone linger before the lid moves. A fellow digger pries at the coffin's edge, and a faint metallic squeal rises as iron hinges grind free. You catch a whiff of ancient oils, myrrh and cedar that once preserved a prince's remains. That fragrant blend floats around you like a benediction, even as the air turns colder. Let that sacred scent settle before the coffin fully yields its secret. The lid slips, and a rush of stale air escapes, a breath long held by the buried prince. You taste that stale sigh at the back of your throat, a reminder of life stilled. In that exhalation, centuries collapse into a single moment of revelation. Pause to feel the weight of that moment before you peer inside. Within, the outline of bones emerges under fractured lamplight, ivory pale, the faintest trace of saffron still clinging to one shard of cloth. The cloth's fibers feel papery between your fingers, yet their scent remains faintly of saffron and rosewater. You press a fingertip to the textile, tasting that whisper of luxury against the dank air. Let that trace of opulence linger as you absorb the chamber's contrasts. Around the coffin, scattered fragments of pottery rest, jars once brimming with wine, now cracked and empty. You lift a shard and breathe in the ghost of fermented grapes, a subtle sweetness mingled with mildew. That fleeting sweetness feels almost mocking in this solemn space. Pause to acknowledge how luxury and decay collude beneath these stones. The walls press in close, rough-hewn block meeting rough-hewn block, each seam a silent testament to human hands. You run your palm along the mortar line, feeling its gritty give and the slight warmth retained from daylight above. That warmth pulses through your skin, a gentle reminder of the world beyond the crypt. Take a moment to let that subtle warmth contrast with the crypt's chill before we press on. At your feet, a tiny golden footstool, ornate but tarnished, catches stray light, its metal edges still sharp. You pick it up, tasting a faint bitterness as the tarnish brushes your lips. It's a small artifact, yet its presence speaks volumes of princely ceremony and discarded reverence. Let that bitter sweetness settle before the next layer of mystery unfolds. And as you stand, footprints in ancient dust, Remember that every step here echoes with stories waiting to be told, and some jokes just aren't worth repeating. Imagine yourself guided into a vaulted annex off the crypt, where lanterns cast wavering light over spread parchment maps. You sense the undercurrent of scholarly tension, as each flicker reveals half-hidden annotations in margins. The air hums with cautious voices debating every carved relief and suspected passageway. Let that atmosphere steep in your mind before we observe the power plays behind the dig. Two lead archaeologists stand at a wooden table, one draping his cloak over a pile of site reports, the other tapping a quill against her lip. Their whispers trade praise for discovery and veiled concern over ecclesiastical oversight. You taste the sharp tang of rivalry, as eager ambition clashes with prudent caution. Pause to note how every polite exchange conceals deeper motives before we move to the next council. A royal envoy arrives, bearing a sealed charter stamped with the king's crest, its wax warm and pliable under your fingertips. You feel the weight of the crown's interest in reclaiming relics for the treasury, a reminder that heritage can be as valuable as gold. In that moment, you sense the scholar's excitement momentarily overshadowed by courtly obligation. Hold on to that duality before we peer into the church's stake in these bones. A bishop's attendant hovers by the doorway, murmuring concerns of sacrilege if the tomb is disturbed without papal permission. You hear in her tone the velvet and iron of spiritual authority beckoning the diggers to tread lightly. The hush around her words feels more binding than any stone seal. Let that solemnity settle as we shift to the academic faction's counter-argument. In a corner, a university professor traces a line on his sketch of the crypt's layout, insisting provenance must precede removal of artifacts. You sense the impatience coiled in his posture, an urgency born of funding deadlines rather than pure curiosity. That impatience tastes faintly bitter against the bishop's saccharine cautions. Pause to recognize how competing priorities flavor every decision before we explore the local lord's claim. A minor noble strides in, claiming ancestral rights to any treasures unearthed on his land, voice ringing like a gavel. You catch the metallic scent of entitlement lingering around him, as if the air itself sizzles with his expectation. His words exert a quiet pressure, redirecting allegiances with the precision of a court summons. Let that pressure anchor you before the next maneuver unfolds. Over at a makeshift lectern, the expedition's patron, a merchant turned art collector, reveals intentions to display relics for public wonder. You taste the sweetness of potential fame mingled with the grainy doubt of profiteering. His polished promises shimmer like gilded leaves on ancient stone. Pause to absorb how commerce, nobility, and clergy converge in this single chamber. The lantern light flickers as the royal envoy counters the merchant's proposal, citing sovereign prerogative over any public exhibition. You sense the pulse of authority in his every measured syllable. That authority settles around you like a carved crown press. Hold on to that steady rhythm before we note the academic rebuttal. The professor retorts by brandishing a scroll of legal precedent, ink still damp with fiscal endorsements. You catch the sour note of bureaucracy on your tongue, a flavor so familiar it could be mistaken for stale wine. His calm delivery belies the tempest brewing beneath scholarly robes. Pause to absorb how every document wields power as deftly as any blade. A sudden gust from the crypt entrance rattles lanterns, and murmurs ripple like code failing to compile. You taste that jitter of disruption, akin to a system error in a fragile archive. It underscores how precarious this consensus truly is. Let that hum of instability echo before the final twist. As debates spiral, You realize that claiming a single bone here could rewrite prestige across generations. You feel the magnetic pull of legacy itself, drawing scholars, clerics, and courtiers into silent siege. Each faction's promise feels provisional, as if equating to a software license you cannot revoke. It's like managing version control on history, except there's no rollback button. Take a breath and let that truth settle. Archaeology wields politics as deftly as any sword. And with that, you sense that beneath every artifact lies a struggle for power as ancient as the crypt itself. You bring your palm to the rough-hewn wall, its surface carved by centuries of masons. The stone's crevices etch into your fingertips like faded script. Each ridge whispers of hammer and chisel under torchlight. Let that tactile whisper of craftsmanship remind you of hands long gone before we touch the next artifact. A dusty linen shroud drifts across your fingertips, fragile as a moth's wing. Its fibers feel brittle, ready to crumble at the lightest pressure. You sense the weave's tension, a last defense against time's decay. That interplay of softness and decay anchors you in the material world before we lift the lid on something heavier. Your fingers find a bronze ring set into a reliquary, its patina smooth yet uneven. You trace a subtle dent where generations once pressed their vows. The metal's cool surface warms faintly beneath your touch. Let that sense of communal faith linger as you cradle it in your palm. The chill of the crypt clings to a silver chalice, its rim as cold as mountain spring. You lift the heavy vessel, feeling weight settle evenly across your palm. Tiny nicks along the edge speak of hurried hands long ago. That chilly heaviness contrasts with your own warmth before we slide into darker depths. Beneath you, ancient wooden floorboards creak under your weight. Grain burrows against your soles, rough as coarse wool. Each plank's imperfection vibrates up your legs. Those vibrations are echoes of centuries of footsteps, steady guides toward the next surface. A torn tapestry's fringe brushes your fingertips, threads tickling your palm. The raised weave forms patterns you can feel more than see. Some fibers still hold dyed pigments, faint ridges of color beneath your skin. Let that sense of textile storytelling wrap around you before the metalwork awaits. A suit of armor leans in a corner, its breastplate cool and unyielding. You press flat against the steel, noting its imperceptible warp. The metal's chill spreads like spilled mercury. That implacable surface reminds you of shields and defenses before we explore the intimate buckle of a gauntlet. You unfasten a gauntlet's leather strap, feeling a supple hide under your fingers. The soft susurration of peeling leather follows. Inside, the lining is threadbare, whispers of comfort under each joint. That contrast of robust steel and weary leather shows the human cost beneath the grandeur. Your hand brushes against a leather-bound tome jutting from a pedestal. Its scuffed cover yields under gentle pressure. The pages smell of old parchment, each one crackling like brittle wings. That quiet intimacy of books reminds you that touch can unlock more than doors. A marble funerary marker invites your palm to its polished face. You trace deeply carved letters, every curve and angle crisp beneath your touch. Tiny pits collect fine sand that slips through your fingers. In those pits, you sense memories settling, ready to release their stories. As you withdraw, your fingertips carry a mosaic of textures: stone, cloth, metal, leather, and paper. Each impression layers upon the next, weaving a tapestry in your memory. Imagine that layered touch settling in your bones as you rise from the crypt. And remember, you can't unfeel the past once you've pressed your hand to it. so tread lightly. It's like shaking hands with history, only it leaves you with splinters instead of business cards. Imagine yourself gliding past rows of polished pewter goblets brimming with spiced mead, each sip carrying a faint clatter of laughter and hushed gossip drifting from embroidered cushions. You inhale the warm aroma of roast pigeon, its skin rubbed with honey and thyme, weaving among distant notes of saffron rice and almond pastries resting on silver trays. Beneath the vaulted ceilings, the scent of caramelized onions and damp stone lingers, reminding you that beneath the illusion of abundance lies a drafty hall where winter's chill seeps through cracks in the marble floor. In this moment of indulgence, the hall's grandeur feels both captivating and isolating a feast, designed to distract from the court's invisible debts and whispered threats. As platters vanish, servants replace them with fresh courses. Yet beneath the gilded service lies a cellar half empty and wine barrels nearing their last sour drops. The taste of sweet fruit preserves momentarily masks the bitterness of unpaid debts, echoing through corridors with the soft melancholy of a distant lute's final chord. You pass carved walnut tables where bowls of buttered turnips rest beside cracks of stale oats pressed into coarse loaves. A subtle tang of curdled cream teases your tongue before a courteous bow directs you toward a pew overlooking a tapestry depicting coronation scenes. Yet behind each tapestry, the hidden odor of damp wool and aging parchment seeps into the air, whispering of poorly funded scribes struggling to transcribe edicts. This gentle trick of aroma and flavor barely conceals the strain of multitudes reliant on a treasury stretched beyond fine linens. Each swallow reminds you that while the palate feasts, the coffers ache with liabilities that echo through the corridors. A hush falls as a new delicacy emerges. Thin slices of spiced venison, its glaze gleaming under torchlight. You discern a trace of juniper berries woven into the meat, subtle enough to inspire a moment of serene delight. Yet that same spice conceals the fact that many estates owe more than they can repay, debts hidden beneath layers of opulence. The rhythm of the feast unfolds with meticulous precision, every course a carefully scripted illusion of plenty. Inhaling the scent of warm bread straight from the oven, you feel momentarily buoyed by the comfort of freshly baked crust. But a faint undercurrent of burnt grain bites at your senses, hinting that the baker's firewood supply is dwindling. You lift a handcrafted porcelain cup to sip honeyed mead, infused with rose petals, the petals' perfume dancing lightly on your lips. That floral sweetness artfully disguises the fact that barrels often run low, forcing kitchen masters to water down supplies. The orchestra's soft strings play in a distant gallery, their melody mingling with the fragrance of melted cheese and roasted garlic. In every spoonful of parsnip soup, there lies a paradox, a blend of nourishment, and a reminder that some kitchens recycle yesterday's scraps. Recall the sweet warmth of mead you savoured and the promise of succulent game, before understanding that the kitchen's storerooms brimmed more with rumours than resources. Even as laughter rings softly, you detect the hint of tension in every mirrored archway, each exhaled breath carrying the weight of unspoken burdens. The slow swirl of wine in your goblet releases faint notes of clove and underripe grapes. A final flourish before the cup runs empty. You imagine the silent sigh of cooks when the last barrel yields only a thin, sour trickle. Instead of fanfare, a muted clang of distant kitchen implements reminds you that grandeur often rests on a fragile foundation. Your senses, lulled by layers of flavor, remain unaware of the prudent calculations tallying each morsel served. A discreet nod from a courtier signals the arrival of sugared almonds, their cool sweetness marking a transition toward dessert. Yet even that sweetness feels hollow, as if a measure of debt is owed in return for every crystallized kernel. The air thickens with warmth and spice, but beneath it lies the faintest scent of empty granaries awaiting the harvest. Imagine yourself savoring the final notes of cinnamon and saffron, then feeling the slow descent of reality as torches gutter low. The hall's aroma shifts toward wood smoke and fading embers, drawing the feast to a quiet close. A servant's tentative glance reminds you that once the plate's clear, the echo of scarcity returns to the stone floor. You breathe deeply, tasting memory and anticipation in the same breath. That final flavor lingers, a delicate reminder that every feast is both comfort and contract. As the last candle gutter dims, you note how the sumptuous feast momentarily shields the court's fragile balance. You sense the trembling hush that follows abundance, as courtiers mask their worries behind polite smiles. Despite the sensory indulgence, the feast concludes not with jubilation but with a hushed awareness of what lies beneath. Notice how the lingering sweetness now tastes faintly of obligation. Every scent of honey and spice becomes a gentle admonition that courtly illusion is more fragile than you'd imagine. In this liminal moment between plenty and want, the flavors settle upon your tongue like an unspoken treaty. It's amazing how a platter of honeyed turnips can taste like the sweetest IOU you've ever signed. You lean in as a chamberlain unfurls a ledger of unpaid pledges, each line etched in trembling ink and trailing thin curls of wax from a half-melted seal. A duke with silver hair murmurs in your ear about shifting alliances, his voice carrying the faint aroma of his expensive winter cloak. Nearby, a countess flicks a jeweled fan in measured cadence, her every flutter a subtle signal to her faction's silent watchers. You've glimpsed the ledger's weight and the silent dance of signals that govern this court's dealings, and you know each gesture here binds favors with invisible chains. Now, move deeper into the hushed corridors where promises and penalties intertwine. Beyond the carved oak dais, you observe knights exchanging curt bows, whose steel-edged courtesy carries the promise of future obligations. Your gaze drifts to a knot of courtiers whispering over chalices, counting reputations as one might count coins. A squire stoops to adjust a banner while casting furtive glances at his lord's unread grudge. In the corner, a bishop calculates his leverage, offering blessings in exchange for distant political favors. A faint crease in a marchioness's brow hints at debts she may never repay, weighed against her family's fading legacy. Behind a pillar, two barons trade maps marked with border disputes, their lowered voices still crackling with ancestral grudges. You trace the path of those whispers, feeling how influence passes between leather-bound folios and hushed confidences. A herald's sudden knock punctuates the murmurs, sending courtiers into poised attention as if a silent alarm demanded acknowledgement. In that instant, alliances shift. The spell of courtesy masks a ledger of hidden costs beneath every curt nod. Across the hall, a royal advisor slides a sealed vellum across a table, his eyes glinting with the weight of secrets. You follow its path, noting how each scroll, passing from hand to hand, cements trust or sows suspicion. The advisor's lips curl in the faintest smile, hinting he's just deployed a covert update none else can access. A lady in waiting drifts by, her embroidered sleeve brushing your arm and delivering a coded signal more binding than any spoken vow. You catch the glint of a signet ring on her finger, its crest promising sanctuary to those who master its silent code. Nearby, a knight taps his gauntlet in affirmation, pledging loyalty with a single knock echoing like a heartbeat. Petitions circulate like living documents, each signature a vector carrying obligations through the ranks. In whispered asides, names are dropped, alliances sworn, and debts tallied with clinical precision. You find yourself balanced on the edge of these agreements, aware that one mispronounced word could unravel your standing. The Earl at the far end traces a genealogy chart, mapping family networks as carefully as a mason aligns stones. You recall how every branch of that lineage was pruned by war, inheritance disputes, and quiet threats. A duchess lifts her gaze to yours, offering a curt nod that feels heavier than a knight's gauntleted handshake. You return her nod, conscious of the favors her subtle gesture demands in return. The room hums with unspoken contracts, each breath an addition to the court's hidden census of obligations. As empty dishes are cleared, you note how service itself enforces the hierarchies at play. You imagine the steward's ledger tallying each bowl returned, each plate removed, a subtle acknowledgement of a favor fulfilled. The breeze from an open window carries a faint scent of parchment and smoldering embers, a reminder of the fires stoked to power ambition. You sense how every stone pillar and swathed tapestry silently bears witness to this choreography of influence. A slight shift in posture or a lowered tone transmits ripples across the hall, each reaction a careful calculation. You wonder how many alliances began with a shared cup of wine and matured into binding pacts. In the space between measured bows and silent whispers, you feel the pulse of authority beating with deliberate restraint. A stray mote of dust dances through a beam of light, its unhurried drift mirroring the slow unraveling of courtly schemes. You realize that information here flows more potently than any river in the realm, carving pathways of power unseen. A single alteration to a ledger entry could reroute those currents, elevating some and drowning others in obscurity. You lean back against a carved pillar, tasting the faint tang of ink on your tongue as you catalogue the faces of potential allies and rivals. Silence settles once more, broken only by the scratch of quills and the rustle of silk. In that calm, you appreciate the power of measured restraint, aware that the next quiet gesture could shift the balance of the entire court. You exhale, acknowledging that here, a whisper wields more influence than the loudest chant. It's astonishing how a simple nod can carry the weight of a kingdom. And yet, in this realm of subtle obsequy, the softest voice often commands the final decree. Your fingers trace the braid of a silk cushion, its threads cool and whisper smooth beneath your touch. Beneath your palm, the polished edge of a walnut table yields to gentle pressure, its grain guiding your fingertip like a silent tutor. The brocade, draped over the dais, carries a faint raised pattern, each stitch a subtle ridge against your skin, as if history itself were embossed into the fabric. You've felt the luxury of silk and the solidity of carved wood, reminding you how every surface here conveys power and permanence, yet none are immune to the faint wear of time. Now glide your hand across the velvet curtains, noting how the plush pile momentarily absorbs warmth before springing back to readiness. The smooth curve of a gilded chair arm rests beneath your elbow, its metal cool enough to still your breath, yet comforting in its precise craftsmanship. Press your palm against the rough-hewn stone pillar, feeling the subtle undulations where centuries of torchlight have smoothed its surface. A velvet sleeve brushes your wrist, the fabric's softness contrasting with the coarse linen of your tunic beneath. You lift the hem of your garment, fingers catching on a faintly embroidered hem, each loop of thread a reminder of meticulous monastic labor. Beneath the tapestry, the wall's plaster feels chalky and uneven, as if the kingdom's foundations were laid by uncertain hands. Rest your fingers on the edge of a ceremonial sword's hilt, its leather wrap firm and reassuring, yet prone to scuffs where gauntlets have gripped too tightly. The chainmail laid out for tournament practice lies heavy in your lap, each ring clicking a muted warning about the cost of disloyalty. You roll the links between thumb and forefinger, appreciating the cold discipline of tempered steel. In contrast, the velvet-lined scabbard feels like a velvet cradle for that same steel, a soft harbor for a harsh instrument. Touch the polished brim of a wide-brimmed hat. It's felt smooth as eroded marble, shaped by countless bows and gestures of respect. Your boots press into the woven rushes covering the floor, their rushes prickling beneath your soles like a distant memory of fields. A silk glove, left idle on a cushion, slips between your fingers, its fine weave surprisingly airy, as if it was spun from clouds. You pause to feel the iron nails driven into the oak bench, their heads worn flat by the weight of seated nobility. Through the tapestry's fringe, you slide your fingertips into hidden loops, noting how even concealment here is crafted for comfort. The ceremonial mace's shaft rests against your hip, its wood cool and unyielding, yet carved with gentle curves that ease its heft. You shift, sensing the texture of embroidered velvet and coarse hemp braided into a single ceremonial sash. The sash brushes against your tunic, the linen scratch reminding you how proximity to privilege often brings discomfort. Your sleeve catches a metal clasp on a richly ornamented gown, the clasp's hinge moving with a measured click that echoes like a whispered promise. Beneath the table, your knee presses into a velvet-padded stool, its foam dense enough to cradle and firm enough to enforce posture. You run your hand along the marble windowsill, its surface cool as a mountain stream and carved into a gentle concave curve. In that concavity, the fallen petal of a rose rests, its dried edges curled like ancient scroll margins. Lifting the petal, you feel its papery fragility between forefinger and thumb, a quiet testament to fleeting beauty. A silk scarf draped over a chair back slides through your grasp, each fold offering a study in how fabric can both conceal and reveal. The leather of a well-worn ledger cover yields to your squeeze, its surface crackled like a drought-stricken field. You flip the cover open, feeling the raised lettering of the title, each letter a small ridge under your fingertip. As you close it, the soft thud of pages meeting reverberates through your palm, a gentle reminder of recorded promises. Resting your hand on the banister, you note the smooth polish worn by generations of cautious courtiers. The banister's railing curves into a newel post carved with lion heads, their manes rendered as swirling ridges beneath your grip. You trace one mane with your thumb, savoring the interplay of smooth stone and carved depth. The worn step beneath your boot creaks with each shift, its wood grain rising like gentle waves underfoot. Inhaling the faint musk of leather and linen, you slide your hands together, feeling the contrast of fabrics you wear and those you merely admire. You step forward, fingertips grazing the edge of a silk banner, its hem brushing like a lover's soft sigh. That sigh-like whisper under your touch reminds you that even in stillness, these halls breathe with history. As you withdraw your hand, you feel the lingering impression of textures on your skin, like faint echoes of every touch ever made here. In this tactile tapestry, every surface holds both comfort and caution, each texture a silent treaty between yourself and the court. It's striking how the slightest ridge or thread can convey more authority than a shouted decree. And yet, in these halls, touch speaks louder than words, so tread thoughtfully, or risk unraveling the court's finest weave. Imagine yourself closing your eyes as the hush of the banquet hall settles like a gentle blanket. Feel the slow rhythm of distant lute strings guide your heartbeat toward the steady pulse of history's quiet moments. Picture warm candlelight drifting through echoing arches, each flicker a soft lullaby in stone. Let the memory of silken textures and hushed oaths fade into the gentle hum of empty corridors. Rest here in the timeless hush of royal secrets slipping into shadow. If you haven't yet fallen asleep, leave a comment so I know who stayed up longer than I have. Until next time, fare thee well.